Hi, I'm Sharon Crane, alcoholic. It's good to be here. I want to make sure I remember my propers and thank Jody, and Bruce even gave me his truck. So, and he's trusted me with the keys all weekend. So it's pretty good. And thank you for everybody that brought Tom and Kevin and Bobby and me out here. It's just, I send you greetings from California, and my husband told me to make sure he tells you he sends his best, which is me. He's got almost 25 years of sobriety, so he knows his stuff now, so it's pretty good. And, thanks, Mickey, for getting me at the airport, and it's just been absolutely great. I'm really an Iowa girl in my heart, and yeah, all right, yeah, I've got my Iowa peeps are here, and my St. Louis peeps are here, and my Milwaukee, and my Madison, and Dan's here, and it's just great. I like coming home. It's just sweet. It's sweet. I was listening. I was driving the truck here. I thought went and got all gussied up, and I was driving the truck here, and I was listening to Bob Dylan, and yeah, and some other old blues singers, and looking at the corn going knee high by the 4th of July. I mean, I just looking at the barns, and there was a little sunset strip happening, and I'm listening to the owls and the frogs, and looking at the lightning bugs, and I'm at home. I'm at home with you, and God, it feels so good because I couldn't wait to get out of Iowa. I really couldn't. I was a little girl in the cornfield, sitting there, sitting in the soybeans, looking for the mothership in the middle of the summer. I knew the chute opened a little too soon, so it was supposed to drop me off in California and at Iowa. Okay, so here I am, and life has been, God, it's been terrific. Sobriety has been the biggest gift. I know it's been talked about, the gift, and if you're in an AA meeting and you're hearing the solution, which is chapter 5. We are the lucky ones because you can, take a little walk down the highway tonight. You're going to see him coming home. Go stand in the middle of town and throw a stone. You're going to hit an alcoholic that will never have the privilege to hear chapter 5 read at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. We are the lucky ones. I may never win the lottery, but I have beat the odds. I beat the odds to just show up in Alcoholics Anonymous, every single one of us. Every single one of us. And Bobby talked about it. Bobby talked about, finding your gift. Whatever your gift is, each one of us have a special one to give. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people leave the gift on the seat and walk out. So I hope you find your gift and give it, because life is sweet today. Really, that's the word for it today. My son is 23 today, so it's his birthday too. He's 23 on the 23rd, so it's his golden birthday. And I'm with you. And that's okay. He doesn't really mind. He got a card with money, so, And I talked to him a couple of times and wrote him a real mushy card. So, he's never seen his mother drink. He's grown up in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we raised him, and that's what we do. I met a lot of people this weekend that we are the family of understanding. We come from families are broken, families have hard times, but we come to Alcoholics Anonymous and we find our people. We find the mothership people. We find, our family of understanding. And I have a family of blood, and they're great. They're great. I am the only alcoholic. I don't know what happened. I feel like I'm in the carnival up here. I don't know about y'all, but kind of part of my story. You get into town and you throw the joint down and you hang up your flash and show a little skin, and here they come, and so I'll try to behave, all right. Anyway, I started drinking in my teens. It was a country road. We were listening to, I think it was that Little Rock, Arkansas station. We could get some hard rock on I think it was 1190. And we went out in the country, and I was hanging out with the Clark boys in the 57 Chevy and hanging over the front seat. And it was, Mark and Glenn Clark, and then me. I'm the the skinny little knock-kneed, flat-chested one hanging out. And we went on this country road, and there were a lot of cars parked there, and everybody turned off their lights, and we all cranked up the radio stations to the same channel, and somebody had some Schlitz beer and some Canadian Club. And thank you, Canada. Thank you, Canada, because it started for me that night. I won the Chug-a-Lug contest. You know, it was Pop Tops back then. So we church keyed the bottom, we held it up and popped the top. And you know, I won that night. I was like just out of the gate. And I don't know, my little trainer bra grew, and, you know, pretty soon Marilyn Monroe was dancing around, and I had a great time. I drove cars. I drove cars, and I danced with the football players, and I shoved Miss 38D across the road, and I arrived, and alcohol was spiritual for me. It was absolutely spiritual. The spirits of alcohol worked for me. I had a reaction to drinking alcohol that filled me up from the tip of my head to the tip of my toes. And I chased that. I liked that feeling. Now, I had a lot of promise growing up. I had a lot of potential. I don't know if any of you have heard that word before, but I had a lot of potential. And I was even a young citizen of America at one time. They took 100 of us to the White House from across the country, and I won this contest. And the town was very proud of me. And the only reason that I tried out for this contest and wrote the essay and submitted it was to beat my older sister, and I beat her because she's a Mensa. She's brilliant. She had everything. Very, very bright girl. She read every book there was, so I wasn't going to read. And, I'm the one that, read the classics in sobriety because I never read growing up. And my younger sister was Nurse Sally, wanted to be a nurse and moved to Alaska when she was 4 because she got a nurse kit for Christmas, and that's what she is. She's a nurse in Alaska. And my brother, he's a great guy. He got a doctorate. And then there's me. I always bring the party. It's just when I go home now, I bring a lot more classier group of friends. Nobody's stealing anything. No one's, we're not worried about, who's passing out in the snow. It's just, I always bring the party, and that's who I am. I love people. I love hanging out with you guys. I love being in the middle of it. I love being in the mix. I love staying flexible and teachable and learning and growing and changing and seeking. I'm a seeker. I love it. I love in Alcoholics Anonymous that you can seek God every single day. Every single day I get to seek God. I don't have to go find God and that's it. I get to seek God every single day. And I really think all you have to do to lead a spiritual life is to brighten the corner where you live. However you want to brighten it, just brighten it. Let your little light shine, whatever it is. And so that's such freedom. The Freedom Fellowship, what is it? Freedom Fellowship and Freedom, Faith, and Fellowship. We can't forget the faith part. I think it's so beautiful that we get to have the freedom of our own higher powers. But I went off to the White House, and I was drunk at the reception that they had for us. I had met the boys from Virginia, and I had a little weakness for boys from Virginia, and I was stepping on my little patent leather shoes as I'm trying to get through the reception line without, messing up in front of Lucy Bird, Linda Bird, and Lady Bird. I was trying not to embarrass my home state and my hometown. And I found my journal about 5 years ago when I was cleaning out some stuff back in my room I grew up in. And I was worried about my drinking. And it was a secret at 16. And I was a nice little Catholic girl, but as soon as I found boys, I wasn't such a nice little Catholic girl anymore. And I would go into that confessional and hope that Father Gibbs was sleeping because I'd be in and out in 30 seconds. Because if you're in longer, you're a bad girl. That little town, that Meyer girl, she's in there for 60 seconds. What's she doing? I better call her mom, So I was worried about that, and I had a lot of potential, but I was starting to get in trouble. And I went off to college because that's what you did in my family, and it was the 60s. And let's just say it wasn't just say no, it was just say thanks. And so there was a lot going around to enhance your drinking. I had a fake ID. Oh, I'll tell you, every time I hear the Righteous Brothers, when I was in high school, my mom and dad would drop me off at the Dansmore Ballroom in Swisher, Iowa. And because I couldn't drive yet. Maybe I was 15, and I would start dancing with the boys. And when the slow dances would come on, I get up close to those V-neck sweaters and smell of English leather or Jade East or whatever it was. But I wanted to make sure underneath that British Sterling, I could smell that bourbon. And if you didn't have that bourbon smell and you just smelled like English leather, I was moving on, because I knew one of those boys from Iowa City had that bourbon in their car, and that's the one I was going to dance with. Then my parents would pick me up at midnight, and I'd sleep in the back because I'm tired of drinking, and they just thought I was tired from dancing. Nobody in my family was alcoholic. Nobody knew alcoholism, and in college there was a lot going on in the 60s, and the nice little sorority girl, those clothes started to peel away, and I started to notice what was going on across the footbridge and in the art department and in the student union, and there were a lot of sit-ins and be-ins and love-ins and everything ins. And like I said, the sorority clothes left, and I would start to come home with people with eyes spinning and barefoot, and people that would sit at my dining room table with my parents, and they would be post-verbal. They just couldn't say a word. They were too messed up. And I remember going home. My parents lived 3 miles out in the country. The Cedar River was my backyard. And I woke them up because it was really important to tell them this piece of truth I had found. And I was always seeking truth. So I woke them up. They came and they sat at the table, and I had one of those guys with me with the spinning eyes and not saying a word and drooling on himself or something. And I said, okay, Mom and Dad, it's real important. We're going to have a new relationship, because I was starting to upset my parents with things. I said, you're going to be Marge, no more Mom. And you're going to be Frank, no more Dad. And don't call me Sharon anymore. That's a corny name. My name is Cher. And it's not like Sonny and Cher. It's Share. So just Cher. And my dad kind of rolled his eyes, looked at what I was sharing with, and got upset his jaw and went to bed. And my mother just went, oh, Cher. She just... And it's like, what? I was defiant. You want me to share with you? I'm sharing with you. That's my name now. Share. You want to know about me. This is me. And you're going to bed? It was all about me. And later on, that kind of, that defiance turned into, I'm not hurting anybody but me, so leave me alone. And it's like, is that alcoholic or what? Just stand back and watch me die. I'm not hurting anyone but me, but leave me alone. You just stand back and stay in the shadows and watch me die. And alcoholism is just the height of being. I got so independent, is what I called it. I don't need anybody. I had my heart broken by the guy I was going to marry. I caught him being tutored one night by his tutor, and I was driving by, and there he was kissing her goodnight, and it was like, wait a minute, So I got really drunk, and I went down up to his place after he got back. And I started swinging at him because I was mad. I mean, I was engaged. We were going to be married. And he took my arm and he got me on the ground. And I thought, man, no man is ever going to touch me like this again. And I'm not going to even cry. And when I told my mom about it, she said, aren't you sad? And I said, yeah, but I'm not going to show it. And alcohol allowed me to stuff those feelings. Alcohol allowed me to stuff a lot of feelings. And I drank. It was medicinal for me through that first piece of pain that I remember. And pretty soon, I wasn't doing, I was an art major. I was painting pictures. My dad and I used to walk down the street and look in this, the little town that I grew up in, and look in the restaurants. And there's the painting that I had done hanging on that wall. Look where they hung it. There were pictures that I had painted in people's homes. And now I can't. Now I'm so drunk. I'm at Joe's place before I go to art school, and I'm so drunk that I created paint on me, and then I would lay on the canvas. That was my creation, was kind of pass out on the canvas with paint on me. So I had a lot of denim with paint on me, and but the teacher was on to me, and he said, I don't think so. And of course, I had to get defiant and angry. And by the end of that semester, it was my second year of college. My bags were on the steps, and I started to take my geographics. And You all have our chapter 3. You know, whether you did them in your own hometown or you did them in your own bedroom or you did them out there in the world. And I started running, looking for myself. I had no idea that, I took me with me. I had no idea that the reason the grass was greener. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and a speaker named Norm Alpe used to talk a lot in California, and he would just light up the room. And Norm said, I'm the newcomer. I'm sitting in Ohio Street, and it's this little meeting room that had meetings that was just full of energy when Norm talked. It would like light up. And he said, okay, newcomer, the reason the grass is greener. And I sat up because I've been wanting to know that my whole life. He said, the reason the grass is greener is because the other guy took care of his lawn. Ha, 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 ha. And he's laughing. And I thought, you know what? He's right. Yeah, he's right. And then he adds, because, good old timers, they don't give you truth without hope, He gave me a little hope. He said, and if you're new, seemed to look right at me, we know what you're made of. And I'm thinking, God, tell me, Norm, it's a night for truth. What am I made of? And he said, fertilizer. It's like, oh, I thought, good, I made a fertilizer. He said, we're going to make a great lawn. We're going to dig it under, make a great lawn. Ah, ha, ha, and it's like, all right, Norm, I felt really good to know that. I had looking for that my whole life. But I was on the run, and I ended up in New York, and I tried working on an ad agency, and it was the summer of the orange sunshine. What can I say? And I didn't sleep, and I could drink. I was of age to drink in that town. I would drink until 4 a.m, and then I would stay up so I wouldn't miss truth. And I would usually walk through Central Park so I could meet some people and bring them home so we could throw the I Ching or read the bumps on my head or play the flute or do the tarots or something before I put my little corporate clothes on and went off to advertising again with maybe, a half hour of closing my eyeballs. And then my bag of orange powder, I just would lick my fingers. I had this bag of orange powder, which was mine. It was a birthday present. And so I'm drinking 2-hour martini lunches with those people. And I am getting more fried and more fried and more fried. I started to breathe into a paper bag. I had anxiety attacks. I didn't know what they were, but somebody said, breathe into a paper bag. So I was breathing into a paper bag. I get into an elevator. I have to breathe into a paper bag. I go on the subway. I have to breathe into a paper bag. And so I called my dad and I said, I'm ready to go back to school. Give me one more chance, please, And he said, okay, you can go back to college. And I couldn't paint anymore. There's a big piece of me that was left somewhere on the bar up there in Manhattan. I don't know if the bartender would have said, you got to push across your art talent because, I'm going to give you the drink if you give me that, because that's what you got to pay with now as you go down the road. If it would have been that clear, I would say, take it. Take it. I don't want it. Give me my drink and don't give me any bartender philosophy. So I couldn't paint anymore. And I was really depressed. I didn't know what was wrong. My cat was depressed. I had this cat named Raja. He would sit there and I'd burn cones of incense on his head and he'd just watch him. He'd watch the smoke go up. And I'd take it before it burned his head, of course. But he would just sit there and I would just sit there. And, I was drinking a lot of wine and I couldn't go to class and there was no more passion for me to paint. It was gone. And I had no idea where it went. And my dad came down to help me out because I was looking a little thin. He brought some groceries from home and I had a pound of some organic stuff on the table I was cleaning. And it was a little hard to hide. So we had another fight and I ended up going to Colorado. And that's just what I did. Every time it got tough, I got out on the road. And I was in Colorado for a short while, and I gave up my dignity there. And if the bartender would have said, "Pay with your dignity tonight," you got to give it to me tonight. If I'm gonna serve you your alcohol, you got to push across your dignity. And I don't care about dignity, and I buy him one too, and I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Just give me my alcohol, and that's what happened. And I met Bob Dylan and came to California near Aspen, Colorado. And I think it was Bob. I didn't ask him for a driver's license. I'm really not sure, but he sang like Bob. He acted like Bob. We got to LA. He went his way and I went mine. And it was the summer he was missing. Who knows? But he was very spiritual. He had less spiritual experiences. And I ended up at a commune where they asked me to leave for drinking their bong wine one night. Oh, this is a great crowd. There's a whole bunch of you that knows what that tastes like. Whole bunch of you. But they didn't understand. And I was a bad panhandler because I had no self-worth. I just wanted to talk to people. And they'd walk by and look at me and I'd say, you don't want to give me any money, do you? And they'd say, no. It's like, okay. So they ended up putting me in the kitchen where I had to, it was a summer of drought and everything had to go. I mean, the seeds and stems had to go in the chicken cacciatore. Nothing was thrown out. And they were all so dull and boring. And I would want to get drunk and they would just like look at me like, why do you have to act that way? It's like, you people are boring. And they asked me to leave. So I stuck out my thumb. They gave me a dog. And me and Tar Baby headed back to California, to Colorado. And I pulled into my place. I got a ride all the way through Utah we went on unmarked roads. That's when they were building the interstate. I got in the back seat with a bunch of people. I didn't speak English. I was standing outside of Las Vegas. My dog was ready to have a heat stroke. They had beer. I got in the car. I was just totally taken care of. And they dropped me off at my place near Aspen. And somebody else was living there, the nerve. And anyway, I went to the Mountain Man bar and I ended up getting a ride with somebody and we came back to Iowa. I ended up in Iowa. We threw a rod in the old mail truck. It was an old mail truck. And the truck died and I ended up back with Mom and Dad. And my mother said, Sharon, you can stay here, but please stay out of your father's way. You break his heart. And please don't take any drugs in the house. So I drank and I was in that little town, Mount Vernon, Iowa, drinking in the taverns on the corner. There were 3 taverns and I rotated taverns so that everybody would know I was in there drinking every night. And I would sit there and judge everyone. And I was depressed and my dog was my only friend. And then in January, my dog got hit by, I cover the ears of the dogs. My dog got hit by a bus and I found her in the snow. It was cold and I put her in the trunk of the car and I was brokenhearted. She was my only friend. And I got drunk one night and I decided to talk to my dog. So I'm home with my mother's car and there's Tar Baby in the blanket in the trunk, still frozen. And my mother came out and saw me sitting in the trunk with my dead dog. And she just was like, oh my God. We made the earth move the next day with a shovel so we could bury poor Tar Baby. And she said, I wonder what happened to that dog. I mean, she just didn't know. And but that was my only friend and I was really sad. And that's the way my life was going. Stay out of your father's way. My dog is dead. I have no friends. I was sitting in that little tavern and in walked somebody I knew from school. And he said, let me take care of you. Now, I was ready because I was tired and cold and it just, it just sounded good. And I ended up in an organic farm in northern Wisconsin. Non-insulated schoolhouse. We cooked with wood. We baked wood. We had a wood stove. I finally begged them for an oil stove because we were freezing. We did maple trees when the sap would run. We would tap maple trees. And I remember going out there with these empty buckets and then coming back with the buckets full of sap I would get stuck up to my thighs because the crust of the snow you go through. And then I get stuck up to my thighs with 2 buckets of sap. And I'm thinking, what am I doing out here? I can only smoke so much of this organic stuff. I am thirsty. I am so thirsty. I had to drink. There was only so much that I had to drink. And I would go to these little general stores and get my wine and come home and throw Pete Seeger across the room. I mean, I even learned to play the spoons. I was trying to fit in. And they played the banjo and the ukulele. And, I really tried. But I ended up, listening to my Stones, putting on my cowboy boots. Truck driver mouth came back. My new dog, Spook, was with me. And the cat was a little happier because, same cat. That cat hung with me for a long time. He finally retired somewhere in a farmhouse in Iowa. He was like ready to get away from me. It's like, but they didn't understand drinking. They didn't understand my drinking, and I didn't understand their mellowness. And finally, that spring, we planted a whole half acre of some crop and organic crop, and we kind of, we're having we were at odds a lot because I was drinking more and more. And finally they left to do primal therapy. And I just thought, I'll just get drunk and scream at the sheep. Who cares? We had 50 head of organic sheep. And My friend Clarence would come visit me, and he was my only friend. And at night, when he was through with his chores, I would hear the tractor rounding the lane, and I knew Clarence was coming, usually bringing the wild turkey. And Clarence was on the tractor because he had too many DUIs. So he had his license pulled, so he would drive his tractor around town. And some nights he put in his teeth, some nights he wouldn't put in his teeth, but he was my buddy and my drinking pal. And then winter was coming, and I harvested that crop as much as I could, and I went to do a big deal in Menominee, Wisconsin, and I forgot it. I left it back on the farm in hefty bags, and I joined the carnival that night because it was there. I sat with the owner of the show, Matt Armstrong, and we went shot for shot at tequila, and I was still standing at the end of the bottle, and he said, "You're hired." So I said, "Great, what am I doing?" And I ended up, that morning, I packed up a lot of crop, told my dog to get in, found a place for the cat, and a little bit of clothing. And I had a big sun painted on the hood of my car and bald tires. And the car's name was Cheshire because they last longer when you give them names. And we ended up going into Eau Claire and hanging out with Matt Armstrong shows. And I ended up running a shooting gallery. And I was in. I had some organic stuff, and they had the stuff to keep you up all night so you could get to where you're going. And we had a friendship, and we drank. You could drink. I had my bottle underneath, and I'm drinking Jose Cuervo by now. I like tequila, nice and neat, rock glass to the top, no lime, no salt. Just give me my tequila. No, just nice and neat in a big rock glass, and that's what I drank. So I'd have my bottle underneath, and had my dog. I had my flash. Some nights you wouldn't win because I'm pissed off. I'm just mad. Nobody's winning tonight. Some nights, my dog would get a little feisty and nip at people, and this was a nice dog, but even now she's starting to get a little, hinky. And it was great because you could leave it behind you and you could go to a new town. Here I am. The grass is greener every 3 nights, every 2 nights, sometimes we'd get kicked out of town. We'd have to pack up in a hurry and go. And I'm always, if for the rest of my life I get to make amends to the universe, but I had no idea that I was going to come to AA and have to make amends for all of that. I had no idea. I mean, if I liked the lamp in the hotel, the lamp went in the car. Need a little bedding, the bedding went in the car. It's just the way it was. Whatever I saw, I picked up and took whatever I wanted. And so life got very interesting. I called my parents from Arkansas and told them where I was, and my mother started to cry. And my dad and I don't talk. My dad and I can't, when I go home for a little bit, a car will be missing because I need a car. If we sit down at the same table at the same time, one of us is going to get up because we don't look at each other, because we don't talk to each other. If he's walking down the hall, I'm going to wait for him to come down before I go down the hall. He doesn't understand alcoholism. I had tried to cut my wrist at one point in college. They had sent me to a psychiatrist. The priest came down to try to talk to me with my father. The priest and I got drunk. They sent me to the family doctor. They tried Valium therapy for a while. I mean, they tried a lot of things. They didn't know alcoholism, but I didn't either. I didn't know about anything other than I was probably not going to be part of that family anymore. That's where I was headed. And anyway, I ended up with that carnival getting busted for sales and possession in Bogalusa, Louisiana. And I tried to tell them I wasn't selling. It was just my stash, which it was. It was just mine. But there was enough to make it look like sales. So Carnival left town. I ended up in jail with my new roommate at that seedy hotel also. We all went to jail that morning, and it was, the dog went to jail, I went to jail, my guy went to jail, my new friend, and he had a pet skunk named Crank, and Crank went to jail too. So people would come in and look at me and go, "Oh, there's that skunk lady," and look at me through the bars and then move on. And I was waiting for someone to come get me out of there. I had no idea that I was going to be there for over 31 days. And I was starting to have DTs. I had no idea that that's what was happening, but I knew they were coming to get me. So I got a piece of glass from something and I started to cut myself, and I put my blood everywhere around my bunk because they were coming to get me. And I didn't know I was going through withdrawal from alcohol. I had no idea. And they were coming to get whoever they wanted that night. It was a really crazy Southern jail, and they left me alone because I was a little nuts. So I thank alcohol for that. And after being in there, I don't know, a week or two, I don't really remember how long it was, but they slapped some cuffs on me and they threw me in a car and they took me somewhere and threw me in a building. And there sat my father with a lawyer he had hired. And I'll tell you, that's a day I hope I never forget how I felt, because I felt like something off the bottom of my shoe. Just something just scraped right off. There I am. Because my dad and I couldn't look at each other. We sat in a chair next to each other with the lawyer there trying to talk to my father about what I was up against, which was a felony. It wasn't pretty. And maybe do hard time in Angola, in Louisiana. And my dad is there, hired the lawyer, hired the bail bondsman, ready to try to get me out, to do whatever he did, because that's my dad. We don't look at each other. We really don't talk to each other that day. We sit almost shoulder to shoulder, and we can't. We can't talk to one another, and we can't hug each other. But he's there to try to help in any way. When I was 20 years sober, my sponsor let me go home and talk to my dad about that day. I'm glad that I didn't run home in my first year and open wounds, because it was about me, Maya Maz. Or it was about, let's make it right now. It doesn't matter how much it hurts to talk about this. But when I was 20 years sober, my dad was sitting on a dock, and my sponsor said I could talk to him about that at some point. And I went out to the dock and I sat next to him and I talked to him about that day. And of course I said, do you remember that day, Dad? Of course he remembered. He had to buy the plane ticket, rent the car, find where he was, write a check or two or three. And he said, yeah, he laughed a little. And I said, I don't remember much about it. Can you tell me about it? And he told me about it and how serious it looked and the charges looked and how he was worried about me. And I said, what did I say? I don't even remember talking to you. He said, well, you really didn't. Every time something would come up, you'd say, I'm not guilty. Every time somebody would say something to me, you'd say, it's not my fault. And those were the two things I said all day. I'm not guilty, and it's not my fault. And that's how honest I was inside my soul with alcoholism. I had a list. You want to sit by me? You want to get me drinking gin? I'll tell you, that's a sad, sorry night. Give me some gin and put on some sad, sorry country music, and I will tell you about my life. I will give you the list of why I like this. I will give you that list, and you will be so depressed by the time you leave me, you'll never want to see me again. I had a list. I could be the victim if you wanted that. I had learned how to do that. And I got out of jail at 31 days and ended up in the French Quarter, and that's where I did the end of my drinking, was down in the French Quarter. And I danced on Bourbon Street, and we had to make some money really fast. And that guy that I was with, we were together for 2 years. We hated one another. But nobody's leaving first. No, you leave. No, you leave. He was really a crazy guy, and he was always face down going left party, and I just never understood that. And, the skunk didn't like me very much, and, it would nip at me, and, it would, nip at my dog, and the place was filthy. We were living above a biker bar, the Mousetrap Bar down in Lower St. Peter's Street in the French Quarter. And we were on the end with all the snake and the skunk, and we got a snake too, and the dog. And then there was Angela. There were 3 apartments. It was a tar paper roof apartment, who worked nights, let's say, and there's always a lot of screaming going on over there. And then the first apartment, the owner of the bar would, ride his Harley up and just park it there, and that's the way I lived. And one morning I came to the door, and there's Marge and Frank, my mom and dad, at the door. And I had a platinum blonde wig on. My outfit with zippers everywhere. My face had been made up by the drag queen, so it had a little sparkle to it left over from the night before when I was dancing. And a black eye that was trying to be covered up. And there they are at the door. And I remember my father stood there and set his jaw and barely made eye contact with me, wouldn't come in. And this guy put the snake in my dad's face upon meeting him. My mother I remember we went out to eat and she cried into her baked potato. That's what I remember. I don't remember much else because I had just gotten home from partying. It's 24/7 in that town. And that's the way I lived. I'd pass out wherever I needed to pass out to keep on drinking. I loved that town. And a few years ago, we were sitting around, the family was talking, and my brother and sister were talking about that trip. My younger sister Sally and my brother, my only brother, and I said, "Were you in that? You weren't there?" And they said, "Yes, we were." And it was, I mean, if my heart could have it just dropped into my stomach. I felt so awful that I had never even realized that they were there. And I said, "Well, what happened?" And they were laughing. My sister said the guy went out to get some food, and he took me with him because I was going to get some food too. And we went to a girly show, and she was underage. He took her to a girly show. And my brother said, "Yeah, I was so small. I wanted to hurt that guy that had given my sister that black eye, but I knew he was bigger than me. I couldn't do anything." And I was speechless because I realized I'm a blackout drinker. If every single day of my life I get a chance to wake up and fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about me, which is on page 77, when I saw it, it was like, bingo, there's my truth. There's my purpose. If every single day of my life I get to do that, it's an absolute privilege. I don't get to judge who gets it and who doesn't get it. I got to keep my eyes open to see who needs it. Chuck C used to talk about it rains on the just and the unjust, and it's not my job to judge. I've got to keep my eyes open to see who needs what done. I'm just supposed to help other God's kids get things done here in the universe because I'm a blackout drinker. I can't go back and make amends for people, places, and things I don't remember. So I get to every day of my life be of service. That's all. It's really a wonderful privilege. So the end of my drinking was in the French Quarter. I did go to St. Louis for a little stint. I met a friend who's here tonight. We tended bar together at a place in St. Louis. And it's funny to have somebody with me that saw me drinking and I saw him drinking. And we're in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a trip. And I found this guy. Now, believe me, we had knife fights and for nobody that was going to touch me again when my first love broke my heart. I mean, it wasn't fun unless there was a little violence going on. It wasn't love unless there was a little violence going on. And I went to find him. I moved to St. Louis to find him because his parole had gotten pulled. They had found him. And he got off his Harley, took his helmet, smashed it through the windshield when he saw me, spit in my face and said, "If I ever see you again, I will kill you," as a police car pulled up, or it would have gotten messier. And I thought, okay, I think the relationship's over. It's like, I finally let go. That's the kind of alcoholic I am. My second sponsor, when we did a little inventory, she said, "Sharon, you're like this girl that used to be in our group. Remember this lady?" And she told me her name. I said, "Yeah." I said, "She was kind of odd." She said, "Yeah, but you didn't know her when she used to walk around with this thing in her hand, and she put it in her pocket and nobody knew what it was. And then she'd hold it and look at it and then put it back in her pocket and walk around like that for a long time. And finally, one day, she let me peel back her fingers just to see. She trusted me to look to see what was in her hand, and it was like an old, dried-up cat turd. I said, "Well, gee, thanks. I remind you of her." "Okay." And she said, "That's what you remind me. You just hung on until it was dead. It was dried up and dead. You have to learn how to let go." And I remember thinking, I know, but it was my turd. It belonged to me. It didn't matter. That's the I'm one of those loyal Leos, a double Leo, man. I'm on your leg and you're dragging me out the door if we're not done yet. It's just letting go is hard for me. I've had to learn how to loosen my grip. I don't wake up in the morning in my life and go, "Oh, good morning. Let me get rid of jealousy today. That's a good one. Let me work on jealousy today." I still have to have a little bit of some pain to lead me to my knees, to lead me to surrender. But I don't hang on and get drug anymore. I don't do that, but I used to because I didn't have anything else. He was all I had. It was a sick, sorry relationship, but he was all I had. I came back to the French Quarter. I had had pancreatitis, my gallbladder removed. I had liver spots on my face. I started to puff up, be toxic. I had a book in my backpack called Be Here Now by Baba Ram Dass. I couldn't make a commitment. If you asked me when you come into my bar, I was tending bar, and you come into my bar and ask me, what do you do when you get off? I'd say, I don't know. You better come in at closing. I couldn't make a commitment. And I ended up tending bar at a place where even my alcoholic friends didn't want to come have a drink with me. And they fired me for having a bad attitude. And I'm on the road again. And my friend Michael was shot and killed on Mardi Gras Day. He was outside my door. I was inside. I had closed the door on him in a blackout. I was the last person to speak to him. I had no idea what I said to him. Everybody hit the deck, and I ended up in the bathroom with the door locked, taking everything that there was, ingesting it because they were coming again. Because I was on probation and it was over. And we happened to know somebody on the force who showed up and got me out of it and said, you better leave town for a while. I sat there being interrogated by homicide on Mardi Gras Day before my friend showed up. And I am drunk. I am high. I am rolling. I am tripping. I am in every state there is. I couldn't speak. They would come in and say, they would call me awful names and they would leave because I couldn't speak to them. And I was on the third floor of this police department watching the Mardi Gras floats going by a couple blocks away, wanting to just run through that window. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't even move. And I ended up running. And that was in March 75. I got sober in August of 75. From March to August, my mother and father didn't know where I was. People that loved me and cared about me. My friends from the French Quarter didn't know where I was. I went from coast to coast. I slept in doorways. I slept on the street. I slept on your floor. I slept in your bed. I slept wherever. But, if you would have stopped me and talked to me, I would have said, I'm free. I'm free. Look at these suckers with their lies. I am free. I ended up at Barney's Beanery one night. I was drunk as a skunk in West Hollywood, and I'm trying to get to Hawaii now. But there's this big ocean. I don't quite know how to hitchhike across the ocean. So this girl was really drunk, and she had this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. And the bartender took away her keys because she was so drunk, called her a cab, and she kind of leaned her way on the wall as she walked out the door with this big book under her arm, drunk as a skunk, and we all gave her a toast. Good for you, Chris. Go to A&A, and we gave her a toast as she fell out the door into a cab. And I had never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous before. I was kind of embarrassed for her with this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, under her arm. But she was going to be my Eskimo to you. I had no idea. And I ended up back in the French Quarter, and then ended up back in West Hollywood, stuck again with no money and no job and unemployable and 175 pounds and red dashiki and a Panama hat and sick. I'd have so many drinks I couldn't turn off my head. I remember when my parents left that French Quarter that one day when they saw me like I was, and I sat, and I don't know if I had 14 or 15 rock glasses full of Jose Cuervo, I probably went through the quart. And my head wouldn't shut off, and yet I couldn't walk to the bathroom. And I knew I wasn't part of that family anymore, that it was over. And that's kind of when hope walked out of my life. Something gets darker when hope walks out of your life and you're drinking. And it was pretty dark at the end. And I was in Barney's one night, and I'm sitting on a bar stool, and a couple guys with Harleys said, we're going to go to Palm Springs and party. You want to come? And, I like bikes, so I got on, me and my dashiki and my Panama hat and my back pass. And I don't know, they closed the bars at 2, and we got on and we started riding out, through the road, through the mountains to the desert. And we got there in the morning and got a cheap motel, and then we started drinking when the bars opened. And they left me. I said, where are you going? And they said, we just need a little extra weight. It was windy going through the desert. Thanks a lot. It was like, oh, they didn't even want to party with me. I was just dead weight is what I was. And I guess I kept drinking all day, and I went to a club, and I don't remember. And thank goodness for blackouts. But when I came to, I was in some apartment somewhere with some guys. working me over, and I thought this has got to be a DT because my DTs are always those kind of choking me, violent kind of DTs I would come to before I could get a drink of alcohol. But this was really happening, and the thing I want to never, ever, ever forget was I just stopped screaming. I gave up. That was July 27th, 1975. I fight my way out. The dog bites our way out. I bargain my way out. I hitchhike. I know how to get out of situations. And that night, I didn't care anymore. I just stopped screaming. And they took me outside of town and rolled me off the side of the road. And it was the desert. I had a concussion. I had no clothes on. I had been scraped around and drug around. My jaw was broken in 3 places and my nose was broken. And I had been left by the side of the road. And, there was enough of me gone that night that something inside of me said, get up, I want to live. And I heard that voice, something deep within. We're all survivors. We are all survivors. If you know people that are out there, if they're breathing, there's hope. We are survivors and we are the lucky ones. And anyway, I ended up 2 feet from a lawn chair. There's somebody's condominium, and this gardener found me and called an ambulance, and I ended up on a gurney in this hospital, and the police were there, and I had to write my name because I couldn't talk. And as I looked over on this thing I was writing, it said victim. What? Yes, they know what I am. It was really, if that broken face could have smiled, it would have smiled, because it was like, that's what I was shooting for at 25 years old, was victim. And I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks, a victim of violent crime in the state of California, and they caught these guys, and I don't remember anything, and I don't know what's happening, and no one's sending me airline tickets, and I'm hitting that morphine button every so many hours before they took it away, and they were on to me, and then then I just had pain. And somebody came from that bar in East Beanery and said, you know what? I know you have no place to go. I know you have to go to court because this is it's a court case, and you can come stay with me. And somebody gave me the article from the newspaper that talked about the unemployed bartender from New Orleans and my name and what had happened to me. And I stuck that folded up piece of newspaper in my pocket. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, you didn't ask me what happened to me. I was waiting to pull that out and show you, look, I made the paper. This is me. They were just really happy that I looked so surrendered. They look at me and go, God, look at her. She looks tired. Looks like she could make it, They were happy I looked so bad. But I lived with this guy above a liquor store. He'd buy me red wine every day before I'd go to work, and I'd stick the straw into that cheap red wine through the wires on the mouth where the tooth had been kicked out, and I would suck on that red wine because I'm a drinker. I have nowhere to go. There's no more magic in alcohol, but I'm a drinker. And one morning he said, you got to leave. You're depressing me. It's like, and I had nowhere to go, and I called Mom. What do? You call Mom, collect. And my mother had gotten a phone call from someone in that Palm Springs hospital, but didn't tell her what hospital I was in, and they told her what had happened to me. And so for 2 nights and 2 days, my sister in New York and my mother in Iowa called every hospital in California. They didn't tell her what city I was even in, until they found me. So my mother didn't sleep for 2 nights, wondering what was wrong with her daughter. And I'll tell you, if nothing else, because of Alcoholics Anonymous, my mother sleeps at night. Thank you. I am overpaid just for that. So I called my mother that morning, and through my broken jaw, I said I needed some money. I needed some help. And she said, Sharon, my mother's never been to Al-Anon. She said, I can't help you anymore. Go to the Salvation Army. Mom always helped me. I tell you, $20, you'd have another speaker. Seconds and Inches that morning. And I looked down, and there was a phone number there, and I called it because it was that girl, Chris, that was always nice to me, let me sleep on her couch and gave me some clothes. And not relating, she was the one with the big book in the bar. And she recognized alcoholism. And she couldn't help me that day because she wasn't sober. So she gave me to somebody else to call that day. And I don't call strangers asking for help. But I did that day. And I had this wired jaw. First 3 months in AA, I was wired shut. I couldn't talk. I had to learn to listen. It was a blessing, I'll tell you. So I'm talking to this woman, Suzanne, on the phone like this. And she knew the Duck Pond liquor store where I was because every alcoholic knew that liquor store. So she got Duck Pond out of my. She knew exactly where I was. She knew exactly where to tell me to sit. And she had her two most beautiful babies come over to pick me up. I swear she picked the prettiest ones. I'm sitting on the steps of this liquor store. I used to love driving by that liquor store. They tore it down about 4 years ago because I could look at the stairway where I lived upstairs and imagine that girl with the broken spirit and the broken jaw and the broken nose and the broken life sitting there in the broken Huarache shoes sitting there. That was me sitting there with no hope, no life. And Alcoholics Anonymous came, picked me up, put me in the back of a Volkswagen where I couldn't get out, took me to this church where I went, oh God, I can't do this. I can't do eternity. I thought we were going to have to do something for eternity here. And I ended up where they raised my hand. I didn't know what they were doing, but the man at the podium said he always waited for the spaceship to land and say, you can come home now, Bill. And I went, spaceship guy. It like took this little ember of life that was me and just threw some kindling on it for a moment. That identification fanned me up. And some guy was talking to me about this book, and he had this book, and he was starting to kind of hallucinate, and I was getting nervous. And so I gave him a quarter. It was all I had. And he went over and he wrote down that I had, I guess, written my name in a quarter, wrote in pencil, Echo Park, Los Angeles, August 20th, 1975, in my name. And I still have that book with his handwriting in pencil. He's not with us anymore. Big meeting in the sky. Great guy. I paid him back a quarter at a time because I didn't want to owe you anything. I was going to pay you back and leave because I was just tired. I had to go to court. I had to go. And they found out I got a ride to court. And then they found out I went alone, those AA people, and they didn't let me go alone anymore. I didn't like them there, but they didn't let me go alone anymore. I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. I just kind of went along. And I didn't realize that they had assigned different floors for me to sleep on. I hope you're with a group that looks out for the newcomer. I hope you're with a group that takes the time to walk over and see why that person's hanging by the wall. Because I'll tell you, if you would have said to me, oh, looks like you had a hard road, kid. Looks like you had a hard little life. We'll see you here next Wednesday night. I'd be dead. I'd be dead. What they did was they took over my life and gave me a chance. They knew I had nothing and nowhere to go. And they gave me a chance. And I didn't realize it. I was so out of it. I'm so grateful I was out of it. I just kind of showed up for a while. And I went to, I guess, 2 meetings a day for a while. They'd say, okay, we're going to pick you up. Now, don't drink and don't use. And you're sleeping on this floor. And here's a sleeping bag. And then, okay, now we're going to move you to this house. You're sleeping on this floor. Now, would you have a sponsor yet? I was like, I don't even know what a sponsor is. So I asked this lady, and she was really nice until I asked her to sponsor me. And then it just seemed like, the fangs grew, the nails grew, and she had me do things like read 3 pages of the book a night and take walks during the day and remember the colors. That was my job, remember the colors I saw today. Like, I was so out of it. And go to 2 meetings a day and get commitments. Get some commitments at the meetings. Well, they let me wash the cups at one. This one meeting had real cups. And I had the dryer was a guy from Texas that wouldn't leave me alone. It was like, you get a sponsor, you're going to get drunk, you better work those steps, you're going to get drunk. And I just thought, oh, I hate you. If I could slam this cup in your ear, I would, but I'm not going to. I'm going to wash this cup. And I just was, starting to come alive inside, I guess. And my friend Junan was the cookie girl. And so she dropped me off and go get cookies and then come back with the cookies. And we hung out a lot. And God bless her, she didn't make it. Her Christmas card came back stamped deceased a few years ago. But she was great to me. And she'd go get the cookies, and one night she didn't come back. And I'll tell you, I learned about commitment from people like this. And she didn't come back. And it's like, everybody wants cookies. Where's the cookies? Who cares about literature? Who's got the cookies? And all of a sudden, we're like, the meetings were already starting, and LAPD car, black and white, pulls up to the curb, and this cop gets out, and he's walking up, and he's talking to the secretary. There's a lot of steps up to the top of the church where the meeting was. We're going, where's Junelle? Where's Junelle? What's going on? We're just talking about her. So we start listening, and he said, well, she's in the car. I guess she bought some cookies and then went back and stole candy bars, and then they caught her, and they called me, and I got to take her in, and she's in the car, but she made me promise to stop and bring the cookies. And I'll tell you, those are my teachers. Those are my teachers in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I had the best teachers. And I had a sponsor who made me, call her every day and remember her number. And I remember I was 11 months sober and I had to go have my slip. Because if I stay here a year, I'm stuck. I have to go have my slip. I'm 11 months, and everybody talks about how much they learned on their slip. And I'm not realizing, I don't hear the people that don't come back from their slip talk about their slip. But, I'm 11 months sober, and I can't finish that inventory. I'm going to go back to Vegas. They kicked me out once. I'm going to go back. I'm going to show them. So I'm at the airport, and I think I better call that sponsor. She's going to really be mad. We had a relation. I better call her just to tell her not to worry. So I called her in the airport, and I said, I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to have my slip. And she said, fine, be like my friend Stella. I think they go to sponsor school. They get these stories and, baby at the airport going to have a slip, turn to this page, but she said, be like my friend Stella. She wouldn't finish her inventory either, which I thought was a low blow. And she went off and she had her slip and she burned up in a bed. Go have fun. Burned up in a bed. And so now my head is all burned up in a bed. So I thought, thanks a lot. So I'm sitting at the airport thinking, burned up in a bed. Okay. She is really pissing me off. And I went, I bought a notebook and I got a pen and I got a piece of apple pie that sat there all night. And I had a cup of coffee after a cup of coffee after a cup of coffee. And I wrote that inventory. I'll show her. She motivated me. She was a smart one. I remember when we did our first third step, I was still wired up and we're like on our knees or reading out of the book or something, And we get up and she's all excited and she's hugging me. She's touching me. She won't stop hugging me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to punch her pretty soon if she doesn't stop hugging me. And she was like, her face is in, right in my bosom. And she's like, so excited we did this third step. And I'm embarrassed. I am so embarrassed. And all of a sudden, something felt all warm and wonderful. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in love with my sponsor. And I told her, and she said, well, let's not make any major decisions in your first year. I mean, I don't know. Am I hungry? Am I angry? I don't know how to relate anything. I was so short-circuited. It's like a computer thrown on the floor and you're going to put one piece of, that wire's working now. It was just one wire at a time putting me back together. I really thank God for her. She was great with me. She motivated with my anger. I remember I called her one morning and I was waiting tables. They wouldn't let me 10 bar. So I have a bad attitude. I'm not making any money. I've got to be there punching at 7 a.m. You want any breakfast? How are you? I'm crappy. How are you? My life sucks. It's like nobody wanted to sit in my station anymore. So the Al-Anons had to teach me how to do that. They taught me how to do that. And I did that and it worked. I had great tips. So what happened was I called her one morning. I had this terrible headache and I knew I must have the brain tumor. So I called her to tell her, I couldn't. And she said, she hadn't had her coffee yet. And I woke her up. I'm not remembering. This is 6 a.m. I'm not smart enough to think of that. And she said, Sharon, you know what? Maybe you are sick, but you got to go to work. And if you die at work, we're going to give you the best funeral that anybody's ever seen in AA. We're going to say great things. Your parents are going to be proud. We'll have the best flowers. But if you die at home in bed, there is no funeral. And she hung the phone up on me. And I thought, I'm going to go to work and die and she's going to feel bad. That's what motivated me that morning to get out of bed. I hope you have a sponsor louder than your head. I hope you have one that's there in your mind just telling you. I almost got drunk over the color of a car. I finally got this Chevelle car. And we painted it Basin Street blue, which was a mistake, Earl Scheib color. I went to pick up my car and it was turquoise. And I went, that's not my car. They said, yeah, that's your car. No, I paid for this color. And I went and showed them. They went, well, that's faded. Well, it wasn't hip then to have a turquoise car driving around LA in 1975, 76. And so I drive up to work. I'm on a split shift. I put my orange uniform on and tie those white shoes. And I've got to start that shift. And there's a bar on the other side of the restaurant. And I'm thinking, I need a drink. Screw those people. Nobody, sad, sorry, here I go again. So I'm on my way thinking I'm going to go to the bar. And there's payphones in between. And I stopped at the payphone to call my sponsor to tell her. Well, I'll tell you, within 30 seconds, she had me laughing. I hope that you don't just speed dial your sponsor on your cell phone. I hope that you know that number, because if you're somewhere and you need to know that number, or your cell phone's out of service and you need to call it, I hope you dial your sponsor's number. I dial my sponsor's number. I have a sponsor to this day, louder than my head, and I dial my sponsor's number so that I know that number no matter what. Because I almost got drunk over the color of a car. You know, I am so grateful that I am in a group of people that I have a fellowship that I absolutely crave and love to sit in the middle of, which is, it's my family of understanding. And by being in service, I was in general service. We did panels a lot. The fingers got out there. My world got bigger. AA is so big that it's in my heart now. I mean, it's in my guts now. The central fact of my life today, as it says in that book, the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. It doesn't say okay. It says miraculous. And that's what we get. That's the central fact of our lives today. When you sit in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know where the edge is. I'm an edge kind of girl. I used to love the edge. I edge it with my life. I do a lot. From morning to night, I fill up that day. I want to be like what the poet Blake was. He was sitting on the Ganges River when they were pushing the people down. They light them on fire, make this whole thing about, the bodies when people die. And they push them down on these pyres in the Ganges River. And that's, that's their life just kind of burning as they watch him go by. And he was sitting there watching him go by and watching him go by and watching him go by. And he had this epiphany, and it's like, how should they live for it? It's like, when they throw me on the pyre of life, may I be all used up. And that's what I want. I want to be all used up. And I want to do it sitting in the middle of you, in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, my life got really beautiful for a long time. I met a man. I got married. My dad came out. And walked me down the aisle, went to an AA meeting, met all of you, looked at me at the end of my wedding day. Somebody snapped a picture. I found this photo 5 years ago. I didn't even know I had it. And I remember the moment because I'm having a Peggy Lee, is that all there is, at the end of my wedding day, because I'm an alcoholic. And I've got my hand on my chin on my hand. And my dad is eyeball to eyeball with me. And I remember him telling me, Sharon, look at your life. You've got it made. If you think about doing what you were doing before, think twice. And I remember thinking, God, Dad's giving me some approval here. And I remember thinking, you're right, Dad. I do have it made here. And I have a picture of that. It's the first time I can remember eye to eye with my father in years. And I've got a photo of that. I made those amends to my dad. I made those amends to my mom. I was, doing better, had a better job, working in the travel industry. And my sponsor, I got another sponsor, and she told me that it's time to pay my father back the money I owe him. And I said to her, I don't think that we didn't talk about the money I owe him. And she said, well, it's like another one of those sponsor books things. And I was having a fight with my husband, and I was calling her to whine about him. And she said, I think it's time to make amends to your dad. It's like they wait, They're in way. They have the checklist of what has to come. And so I said, okay, I'll call him. And I called my dad and asked him if I could pay him back the money I owed him. And he said, yeah, it's as much. He had already run the calculator tape. He had already read the big book. And it was a little high, and I was resentful. I had a resentment. My sponsor laughed at me, and she said, you know what? I want one more thing from you. And that's a good sponsor. You get willing, you get ready, and they ask for that one piece, which makes all the difference because they've already been down that path. They've already walked down that trail. They take the time to come back and share their experience, strength, and hope. Hope. And they give you that one more piece you don't think you can have. She said, are you willing to grow through this with your dad? She didn't say, you're willing to make it all better. You're willing to heal. Are you willing to have this great relationship? She said, are you willing to grow through this with your dad? I said, yeah, I am. She said, and I want you to send don't send the cash alone in an envelope. Don't send the cold, hard check in an envelope. Put a note with it about your life. And I said, I don't think he really likes my life. And she said, I don't care. Do it anyway. And so I had to send a note with that check. And, she said, do it on time because Bill and Bob, you might be the only example of Alcoholics Anonymous your dad will ever see. So, Bill and Bob are watching. It's like, oh, God, okay. Be on time with that check and don't forget the note. So I sent that note and check on time, on time, on time. My dad accepted my terms. And there were months I didn't think I'd have it, but I sent it anyway. And the check always cleared. And my dad got a note, or my dad got a Hallmark card, or my dad got a letter I wrote him. 4 3/4 years of sending it on time because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because of a sponsor letter then in my head, because I'm the only example my dad may ever see of the big book. And my dad picked up the phone and called me after Christmas. And he said, Merry Christmas, I don't want your money anymore. And so I quickly calculated, I think it's about 2 years he let me off the hook. He said, but don't stop sending me your notes. And my dad and I got to walk into a brand new guilt-free relationship because of that sponsor who is smarter than me, wiser than me, more sober than me, louder than my head. Thank God she had me put that note with it. And my dad and I got to have some great times. I got to tell you, I love the 4th of July in the Midwest. I don't like it in California. And I remember I got to go home, and my son was little then. And we were doing sparklers, I remember. It was one of those great days where they had the parade. I know, it's not cool now, but I played the accordion. I got to tell you. The Boddicker Accordion Band. Yes, there was me, and the red piqué dresses sitting on the hay bales going down the sauerkraut days float, or whatever it was. Pig days or whatever they have. And there I am pulling on that Titano accordion. And my dad is so proud of me. I did that for his eye. I did that for his eye. And, I got to tell you that, it was one of those beautiful days, and the Boddicker accordion band was there, and there were pie eating contests and watermelon seed spinning contests. And my mother had cooked the greatest meal, and we had seen the beautiful fireworks, and the fireflies were out, and the Milky Way was out, and I'm sweeping up after we did the sparklers. My son and I are writing dirty words, and I'm sweeping up, and my dad comes out. The Thule fog is coming up down by the river, and it's just a beautiful moment. My father starts sharing his emotions with me. And I wanted to pick up something and just say, Dad, there's these steps that, you can use them for your emotions too. What arrogance my head had at that moment that my father's sharing with his daughter. The one who had broken his heart, the one who had mended his heart even bigger because of Alcoholics Anonymous. What arrogance that I thought I could lay something on my dad. Thank God I have a higher power that said, just shut up and listen. And I got to listen to my dad for a lot of years. And April 19th, 1999, he was out on his land, and the John Deere went over on him, and he was gone in a second. And when I got off the plane, AA was already there. And I got to play my dad a goodbye song on his Heliganka Czechoslovakian accordion. And I worked on that sucker all day. And I got to tell you, my second sponsor smoked pot. I loved Jenny. She was great. And I had to get a new sponsor. And 10 years of sobriety, my marriage fell apart. And he had the newcomer in the room. And oh, God. And then she was pregnant and married in that order. It was painful. And I asked Clancy to be my sponsor because he was louder than my head. I needed somebody. And one night I was on my way to baptize the new Mr. and Mrs. Barker, and with hot coffee, because I just thought it would be a good idea. And I'm 10 years sober, and somebody looked at me and said, look at Sharon, she's got 10 years. Do you want what she's got? I was like, oh, shut up. And I was really mad. And my sponsor happened to see me, and he took the coffee out of my hands, and he put the coffee down, and he squared me off, and he looked at me in my eyes. And he says, Sharon, you'll walk through this with dignity and grace. And if you stopped there, I would have said, I want revenge. I don't want dignity and grace. But he added the words that made all the difference. So you can be an example to others. Oh, I don't want to hear that. and I heard it. So Clancy was louder than my head at a good man. And here I am at my dad's wake. And it's like everybody in the town, they don't know my name. They think I'm my older sister. And I'm standing in line and it's raining like hell. And I guess I'm, having a lot of pain. I don't know what to do with this. I'm pissed off because that's the way I get. I got to get mad first. And my sponsor was out of the country when this happened. And thank God for, my 5 people that know where I am that got me on the plane and helped me through this. And I hadn't talked to my sponsor yet. And he was just back. And I got him in the rectory. And I picked up the phone. And I called my sponsor. And he didn't get back. He didn't get on the phone. I'm on hold. I hang up. I called the Midnight Mission back. And the guy answered the phone. I said, tell him he's got 60 seconds, waiting. And he gets on at about 45. And he's feeling bad because he knew my dad. He met my dad and he knew my story and what happened to my father. And he knew my mother and he felt bad and he was giving me compassion. And I said, I have to play this accordion number and I can't play this button accordion. And I don't know. And I get working on it all day and I'm like starting to cry. And he says, Sharon, this is a good sponsor. Sharon, he said, Sharon, you're going to do great. There's not going to be a dry eye in that church. I want you to look around and you're going to see people crying. You're going to do a great job. But I want you to watch. There's going to be a few people in that. Look for the ones sobbing because those are the musicians. Oh, yeah, it's my dad's wake. It's not about me. And it's just a little story of I have to have a sponsor louder than my head. And they have to, they have to be there for me. And they always are because I have, I can pick up the phone at any time. I know the number and I have a relationship. I sponsor a lot of women. I'm so proud to be able to do that. I got to go back to New Orleans at the International. I've been to every International. I will never miss one. They're wonderful. And I go, just how you clean me up. The people in the French Quarter were going, God, you should see Sherry. You should see what that A&A has done with her. She looks great. Just how you had cleaned me up in almost 5 years of sobriety. I sponsor one of the girls that I used to run with. Another one went back to law school. She used to own a bar, from the bar to the bar. And one day in the mail, I got this piece of paper that I had been pardoned from the state of Louisiana. And it was that's freedom. That is just a gift. A gift. And I walked a little taller and straighter after that. And I got to let you know that my dad was very proud of what you had done with me. I get to go back this year for a class reunion, 40 years. Oh, my God. And I'll tell you, I trashed a few of them early on. So they're expecting me to come back and look good because that's what that's what they've seen. They know that I don't drink anymore. They don't quite know what I do, but a few of them do because my dad told them because he's like that. He was very proud of what you had done with me. And actually, the town drunk came to see my dad once, and he was complaining about his wife. My mother told me about this, and my dad told him that he should go to AA. It's helped his daughter. Maybe it'll help him. And I mentioned that a few years ago after my father had been gone about 3 years. I mentioned it at a meeting north of town, north of LA. I mentioned about the town drunk, and this girl came up to me afterwards and said, can I talk to you? And I said, sure. She said, what's that man's name? And I told her, and she said, that's my uncle, and he's still sober. And I went home. She said, wait, this is the part, this is the kiss, this is the sweetness. She said, I went home for a family reunion, and that uncle that your dad told to go to AA 12-step me, and I have 2 years. That's the sweetness. My job is every day to throw a stone in the pond. It's where the ripples go. It's not my job I don't get to see them most of the time. Hopefully they're just going and going. But I just get to every day get up and throw a little spiritual stone of action and try to be one of God's kids out there helping other God's kids get things done. Now, I got to see the ripple land on the shore that day. Oh, it's really such a gift to be in the center of you. I got married a year ago. We eloped to Vegas. My son walked me down the aisle. It was a lot of fun. We went to this little chapel. It was near this drag queen place. It was perfect. We had to stay at the Bellagio and have a view of the fountains. And, I never thought I'd do that again. because I have a really, really big heart and it gets broken a lot. But every time it gets broken, whether it's a newcomer who goes out or somebody who leaves us to the big meeting in the sky or somebody who can't make it, it gets bigger every time it heals. And I just have this heart that's so much full of love and God and life, life and freedom. I used to think freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Oh yeah, I had nothing left to lose when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and freedom is being in the middle of you. Freedom is allowing the God in me. Thank you for the privilege to reach out and touch the God in you. Freedom is to see the corn knee high by the 4th of July. If you look at that corn, you're driving and you see it, there's life. You can watch it grow. I know you can watch it grow in the summer. And there's all that kind of gold life above it, and things are moving in it. And if the sun's just hitting it right, you could just watch it grow. And if you just kind of drive it by, take a glance over and look at it, because every once in a while you see it's all laid out in rows and it's all been planned and the soil's been readied. And that's kind of, and then you just kind of look at it and it's back to all that green and life again. And that's kind of the way it is. Every once in a while I get a glimpse of God. Every once in a while I get to just see there's a pattern and a plan for each one of us. I hope you find your gift and stay. Thanks for having me.